Her 13-year-old daughter went to school and never returned. A day passed, then a week, then a year. Everyone around her said, "You have to let go," but she couldn't. She searched everywhere, on the streets, in her dreams, on the internet. And one day, looking at a random street on Google Maps, she saw something that made her heart stop. On an ordinary crisp autumn morning, Linda prepared breakfast in her small, neatly kept kitchen. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the sweet scent of cinnamon toast as she hummed softly, a routine melody that had comforted her for years. Her 13-year-old daughter, Anna, bounded into the room, her eyes bright with youth and mischief. Anna's laughter filled the space as she teased her mother about being too serious before school. As always, the two shared a ritual of light conversation and quiet affection, a precious, unspoken bond that made even mundane moments seem extraordinary. After breakfast, Anna grabbed her backpack, slinging it over her shoulder with practiced ease. With a playful wink and a whispered "Love you, Mom," she stepped out the door and into the cool morning light. The neighborhood was alive with the familiar rustle of fallen leaves and the distant chatter of neighbors as they started their day. Linda watched from the window, a tender smile on her face as her daughter disappeared around the corner on her usual route to school. A route that had always been safe and predictable. The day unfolded with the same rhythm as all others. Linda busied herself with everyday tasks, tidying up the house, running small errands, and checking in with a couple of friends over the phone. In her heart, she remained confident that Anna would return home safe, drawn by the same routine that had guided her every day since childhood. Yet as afternoon rolled into evening, a strange silence began to weigh on Linda's spirit. The usual sound of the school bus, the bright chatter of Anna's friends coming home, or even a quick text message were nowhere in sight. At first, Linda attributed the quiet to an unusually long school day, or perhaps a family event that she hadn't been informed about. But when the clock marched steadily past the customary pickup time, anxiety started to creep in. She repeatedly checked her phone, scrolling through messages and expecting a missed call or a frantic text. There was nothing. With a sinking feeling, she phoned the school office. The receptionist's measured tone did little to soothe her mounting alarm. "Our records show that Anna signed in this morning," she explained, "but there has been no update on her dismissal or her whereabouts after school." Linda's heart pounded as she left a message for the local police, her voice trembling slightly while describing the routine disappearance. Neighbors, too, began to murmur with concern in hushed, sympathetic tones as they noted that the familiar silhouette of a young teenage girl had not been seen on the usual streets that afternoon. Calls from friends and family filled her phone, each sounding more desperate and equally perplexed. It was as if the normal cadence of her life had been abruptly interrupted by a void, a missing piece that could not be replaced by the assurances of routine. By early evening, the neighborhood's initial concern had blossomed into frantic organizing. Posters bearing Anna's photo and a plea for any information were hastily printed and distributed. Local authorities conducted searches throughout nearby parks, schoolyards, and even the quieter cul-de-sacs of the small town. Yet as dusk deepened into night, no trace of the bright-eyed, laugh-filled girl was found. Linda spent that eerie evening pacing the living room, eyes fixed on the family photographs that now seemed to mock her with memories of happier times, each snapshot a frozen moment of a life that now felt shattered. Undeterred by the growing chorus of resignation from well-meaning friends and even distant family members whispering, "Maybe you should let go," Linda clung to an inner conviction that Anna was still out there. Despite police investigations that eventually lost momentum and whispers in the community hinting that perhaps Anna had chosen to vanish, Linda refused to accept that outcome. Every tick of the clock deepened her determination. She spent the late hours rechecking every possible lead, scanning local bulletin boards, and sifting through every social media feed and online forum for even the most obscure mention of her daughter's name. In those moments, when the night grew quiet and hope seemed like it might fade with the dawn, Linda would close her eyes and recall Anna's vibrant smile, her carefree laughter, and the sound of her light footsteps as she left for school on that fateful morning. That memory was enough to spark a silent vow, a vow that not for a day, not for a week, not even for an entire year would she let despair rule her heart. Instead, she resolved to continue the search relentlessly, letting every spare moment, every online clue, every conversation, and even her dreams propel her forward in the hope that one day, somehow, she might find her daughter again. Little did Linda know that the journey she was about to embark upon, a solitary quest fueled by unyielding maternal love, would span more than 2 years. Each day became a pursuit of elusive clues, scouring city streets, diving into the recesses of internet forums, tracking satellite images, and even listening for messages whispered in the depths of her dreams. And so, on that ordinary morning turned extraordinary by the tragedy of absence, Linda set forth on a path that, unbeknownst to her then, would lead to a discovery that defied all expectations. A discovery that, through a twist of fate and amidst countless nights of tireless search, would come into view on a neglected corner of Google Maps, sparking a dramatic quest for truth and a heart-wrenching fight to reclaim her daughter. In the weeks following that heart-wrenching day, Linda's small world was consumed by an ever-growing sense of loss and desperate determination. Despite the frantic search efforts immediately after Anna's disappearance, the countless phone calls to the school, the urgent notifications to the police, the tear-streaked posters plastered on lampposts all over the neighborhood, the initial hopes slowly began to fade. As days turned into weeks, the local authorities, overwhelmed by the sheer number of cases and budget constraints, were forced to scale back their search operations. News outlets that once gave detailed daily updates on the progress of the investigation gradually stopped covering her story, and even those closest to her began to whisper that perhaps, just perhaps, it was time to let go. Friends and distant relatives, though sympathetic, began to advise Linda to accept the grim possibility that Anna might have simply chosen to vanish on her own, or worse, that fate had taken her away. "You need to move on for your own sake, Linda," said a well-meaning neighbor, his voice carrying a mix of pity and resignation. Psychologists, trying to help her come to terms with the unimaginable, suggested counseling sessions with tailored advice along the lines of, "Sometimes the mind clings to hope even when it would be healthier to let it rest." Yet for Linda, every suggestion to let go felt like a betrayal to the memory of her bright, irrepressible daughter. The conventional wisdom of giving up, of moving on to allow life to regain some semblance of normalcy, only deepened the void in her heart. Linda, however, refused to be beaten by despair. Instead of surrendering, she launched a painstaking personal investigation that would span over 2 long years. In her modest apartment, cluttered with old photographs of Anna's smiling face, faded school assignments, and scattered notes, Linda began to build a small but formidable base of research. With a battered second-hand laptop as her sole companion, and an antiquated smartphone for recording voice memos at odd hours, she started by meticulously documenting every scrap of information the police had once gathered. She created detailed maps of all the possible routes Anna might have taken on that fateful morning, annotated with the names of places she had frequented and the faces of people who had seen her. Every minute detail, such as the time when the school bus was supposed to arrive, the exact entrance Anna always used, and even the weather conditions that day, was recorded with obsessive care. Staying true to her instinct that Anna was still out there, Linda scoured every online forum and social media group dedicated to missing persons. She spent countless sleepless nights sifting through old news websites, local Facebook groups, and community outlets, searching for any mention, no matter how trivial, of a young girl whose description might match her daughter's. Even when the police declared the case cold, Linda updated her personal database relentlessly, adding new information she uncovered from obscure local blogs, private Facebook groups, and even the comment sections under regional news articles. Every whisper, every half-forgotten rumor was recorded with the hope that it might later serve as a lead. Financial sacrifices soon became part of her everyday life. When the search efforts organized by the local authorities sputtered and dwindled to mere sporadic patrols, Linda reached out to private investigators, one after another, no matter how steep the fee or how uncertain the promise. She sold the family car, using the money not only to pay for expert services, but also to fund unexpected trips to nearby cities, where she'd comb the streets, examine satellite images, and even interview locals who recalled a hint of an unfamiliar girl. She often found herself in small-town diners at odd hours, sitting with investigators and sometimes even solitary volunteers who, like her, were driven by a haunting need for answers. In one particularly poignant moment, after meticulously scanning through hours of grainy security footage from a local convenience store, Linda discovered a fleeting glimpse of a young girl with a striking resemblance to Anna. Though the video was too blurred to be certain, that small flash of hope was enough fuel to keep her fire burning. Each time, when exhaustion threatened to take its toll, memories of Anna, her infectious laugh, her carefree steps to school, and the boundless future she once seemed to embrace, rushed back to her, renewing her resolve to search. Linda also turned to technology to bolster her quest. She learned the basics of facial recognition software from online tutorials and began to experiment with free platforms that could analyze archived images. She spent long hours comparing posted frames from various security cameras scattered throughout town against a cherished high-resolution photograph of Anna. Every discovery, even one that turned out to be a false alarm, added another layer to her vast archive of leads, an archive that she meticulously organized using spreadsheets and handwritten notes. Each entry was time-stamped and cross-referenced with local events, weather reports, and even bus schedules. Despite mounting skepticism from the community, and even occasional admonishments from those closest to her who worried she was losing herself in living a paralytic relapse of nightmare, Linda pressed on. To her, these efforts were more than a set of tasks. They were sacred rituals, a mother's relentless challenge to fate. Every day she awoke with a single thought: I have to find her. I must prove that she is still alive. Her determination was palpable, to the extent that even routine tasks were interwoven with the search phone calls to libraries for archived city planning documents, visits to local government offices for archived satellite images, and even deep dives into social media analytics that tracked patterns of missing persons in the region. In the quiet solitude of her nightly vigil, with her eyes bloodshot from staring at endless lines of text and images on her computer screen, Linda discovered that the pursuit of truth was a journey, both solitary and transformative. In those dark hours before dawn, when the world outside was asleep and her thoughts were at their rawest, she would whisper soft promises to Anna. I will find you, no matter how many days, weeks, or years it takes. And every time, as if in answer, a fragment of a memory, a new comment on a forum, or a seemingly insignificant detail from a local observer would glimmer in the recesses of her mind, just enough to convince her to continue the search. Thus, while the police investigation had gradually dimmed and the voices urging her to let go crescendoed around her, Linda stood as a beacon of unwavering resilience. She was not ready to accept that her daughter was lost forever. Deep within her, an unyielding maternal love propelled her forward. Every second, without a clear answer, only fortified her determination, and every new lead, however faint, was embraced as a potential breakthrough in the saga of the missing girl. And so, with a heart fueled by both grief and fierce hope, Linda dedicated herself to a journey that, unknown to her then, would span 2 long years, each day etched with the ritual of relentless pursuit, a testament to a mother's extraordinary will to never, ever give up. In the wake of that fateful day, as the days melted into weeks and then stretched into a whole year, Linda's life became a tapestry woven with grief, hope, and an unyielding determination that refused to succumb to silence. Each morning, when most people rose with the sun to greet a new day, Linda awoke in a haze of anguish and resolve. Every moment of waking life pulsed with the memory of Anna's laughter and the echo of her disappearance. The absence of her daughter was a wound that ached with every heartbeat, yet it also ignited within Linda the courage to keep searching despite the weight of endless pain. As word of Anna's disappearance faded from local headlines and police investigations gradually turned cold, Linda's need for answers only deepened. She reached out to community organizations, speaking with volunteers who specialized in tracking missing persons and gathering fragmented leads. Determined not to let the case slip into obscurity, she took to social media with a fervor that surprised even her closest friends. Linda created dedicated groups on popular platforms, sharing every detail she remembered about Anna, the exact shade of her eyes, the contour of her smile, and the notes from her school days. Through these forums, she connected with people all over the country who either had seen similar cases or had expertise in forensic analysis. There were long nights spent typing, researching, and reposting every morsel of information that could bear even a remote resemblance to her daughter. Realizing that technology might hold the key to unlocking memories lost in the labyrinth of time, Linda plunged into learning about facial recognition software. With modest resources, a borrowed laptop, and access to free online courses, she familiarized herself with the basics of image analysis. Soon she developed a small archive, where she stored every available photograph of Anna, every compromised image captured by traffic cameras, every grainy snap from a nearby convenience store, and even frames pulled from obscure local security footage were painstakingly compared and re-examined. She uploaded these photos onto various missing person databases, hoping that the network of digital eyes might one day catch a glimpse of the girl she so desperately sought. But the toll of this relentless journey was not only emotional, it wreaked havoc on her practical life as well. As weeks turned into months, Linda's single-minded dedication began to bleed into every aspect of her existence. She gradually missed days at her job, when the phone never stopped ringing with leads, or when she found herself poring over endless hours of online footage. Her boss, who once appreciated her hard work, began to notice her persistent absenteeism and distracted manner. Soon, she was forced to face the painful realization that her professional life too was crumbling beneath the weight of her personal quest. Reluctantly, after innumerable warnings and heartfelt appeals from colleagues urging her to take a break, Linda lost her job. The steady paycheck that had once provided a semblance of security was now replaced by the uncertainty of living day to day with only her burning hope as sustenance. The financial strain did not end there. With mounting expenses related to hiring private investigators, subscribing to specialized search databases, and even small costs like printing out flyers and maintaining her online platforms, Linda found herself forced to make harsh decisions. One cold evening, gazing at the family car that had once carried Anna safely to school, Linda made the heart-wrenching choice to sell it. The car had been a lifeline, an emblem of her hope and daily routine. But its liquidation was a sacrifice she willingly bore in order to fund her desperate search without interruption. Yet even as life around her crumbled, Linda's resolve only hardened. She attended local community meetings, sometimes under the covers of darkness, consulting with experts in forensic science and digital mapping. Late into the night, in a sparsely lit room cluttered with papers, notebooks, and faded photographs of Anna, Linda would trace the routes her daughter once walked and mark every possible clue on her handmade map. This map, detailed with every street, every alley that might hide a secret, became both a symbol of her enduring hope and a tangible record of her tireless efforts. In parallel, Linda connected with private investigators who had a reputation for chasing elusive leads. Each conversation over the phone was a double-edged sword, a glimmer of possibility mixed with the cold, hard reality that lead could run dry. They traveled together on short trips to neighboring towns and areas where Anna might have wandered after disappearing from school. In every cafe and roadside diner, Linda asked the same quiet question: "Have you seen a girl like Anna?" hoping that someone, anyone, might recall an unfamiliar child matching her description. Yet, the most striking aspect of that year was that despite the deep emotional toll, the sleepless nights, the constant heartbreak of dead ends, and the isolation imposed by others who urged her to let go, Linda never allowed silence to settle into her life. Every pang of loss fueled her drive to fight against the creeping despair. Her search became the axis around which her entire existence revolved, a mission so sacred that even when the world around her urged resignation, she took solace in small victories, a minor tip from a stranger online, a fleeting resemblance in a blurry video frame, or a renewed conversation in one of the online groups that kept missing children's cases alive in public consciousness. Friends and volunteers who joined her online soon became her support network, a community bound not by shared interests, but by a shared heartache and an unwavering commitment to justice. Together, they analyzed satellite images, cross-referenced social media posts, and compared countless photographs. Every shared detail was a puzzle piece, and Linda, with the dedication of a mother's heart, painstakingly assembled every scrap of evidence, believing fervently that somewhere out there, her daughter was waiting to be found. Thus, throughout that arduous year, Linda's life was a continuous blend of pain and persevering activity. Each second was spent trying to fuse empirical evidence with the deep, soulful hope that had once defined every moment she spent with Anna. Despite losing her job and the financial security that once cushioned her family, Linda's search never abated. Her days were a relentless continuum of investigation, her nights a solitary vigil over a digital archive of leads, reviews of satellite images, and whispered prayers into the dark. In every moment of despair, she fought back with the fierceness only a mother's love could muster, refusing to let abandonment, neglect, or the passage of time silence the hope that whispered that Anna was still alive. 2 years had passed in an endless blur of sleepless nights and faded hopes, and yet Linda's determination had remained unyielding. Every new morning began with a ritual. Before the day's responsibilities could intrude, she would open her laptop, scroll through countless digital forums, and review every snippet of news that might hint at a clue. Her life had slowly transformed into an intricate web of leads, memory fragments, and tireless vigilance. It was during one such midnight session, when the world outside was hushed beneath a starless sky and her apartment was lit only by the glow of her computer screen, that fate intervened in a most unexpected manner. On that fateful evening, driven by a desperate impulse to scour every possible digital archive of local imagery, Linda decided to try something she had never considered before, a deep dive into Google Maps Street View. She recalled reading somewhere that occasionally, updated images could capture life in the neighborhoods her daughter might have traversed without anyone knowing. With trembling hands, she typed in the name of a neighboring town, a place that had once been mentioned in the faded pages of an old flyer for missing children, and began zooming around virtual streets. Her eyes scanned every window, every parked car, every patch of pavement with an intensity that bordered on prayer. At first, the images were nothing more than everyday scenes. Family homes lined up alongside tidy gardens, a charming small-town main street with shuttered shops, and the occasional church spire reaching upward against a pale winter sky. Linda's heart was heavy as she navigated these digital neighborhoods, knowing that each image was a frozen moment in time, moments she desperately wished would reveal a clue. Hours slipped by as she meticulously panned through streets, reviewing images captured at different times of day. Just when she felt that the hours might vanish without reward, her cursor hovered over an area near a modest, ivy-clad church on a quiet street. Something about the scene caught her attention, a detail that sent a jolt of both anticipation and dread through her veins. In the grainy yet crisp quality of the street view, Linda observed an image that was at first seemingly ordinary, a narrow sidewalk along which a couple walked, perhaps just another set of neighbors on an ordinary afternoon. However, as she zoomed in, a figure began to emerge with surprising clarity. There, on the edge of the frame, walked a young girl. Her posture, the way her delicate hand was loosely clasped by an older gentleman in a formal suit, evoked a sense of familiarity that was both uncanny and unmistakable. Linda's breath caught in her throat as she adjusted her view. The girl's long, dark hair, the gentle tilt of her head, and even the soft set of her features were strikingly reminiscent of Anna. The adult man, who walked with quiet authority near the entrance of the church, seemed to exert a protective, if stifling presence, a presence that was at odds with the warm, nurturing memories Linda held of her daughter. Her heart pounded so fiercely that, for a moment, the digital world seemed to stand still. Linda clicked to enlarge the image, painstakingly calibrating the resolution so that every detail could be examined. The street appeared deserted except for the pair. The church's ornate facade formed a silent backdrop, its stained glass windows reflecting a subdued palette of colors. There, in that frozen moment on Google Maps, the girl's face was partially obscured by shadows, yet even in low resolution, every nuance spoke of innocence and sorrow. The man's suit was impeccably tailored, his tie perfectly knotted, a contrast to the casual attire that Anna had always worn. However, it was his stern posture and the way he held the girl's hand that made Linda's heart seize with a mix of fear and hope. A rush of conflicting emotions swept over her. Disbelief battled with overwhelming hope. Could it really be Anna? After 2 long, endless years of relentless searching and near breakdown despair, could this be the long-awaited sign? Linda rechecked the details, the proportions of the face, the way the light fell on her hair, and compared them to the cherished photographs stored in the box on her shelf. There was an inescapable parallel, as if the elusive past were finally aligning with the present digital trace. The screen felt both fragile and monumental in that moment, a fragile window revealing a possible key to her daughter's whereabouts, yet monumental in its potential to turn her 2-year search on its head. Linda's trembling fingers scrolled through the timeline on Google Maps, trying to discern if the image was recent or an archived snapshot from months earlier. The available data hinted at an update within the last year, suggesting that someone somewhere in this quiet town might have been living a life shrouded in mystery. Her pulse quickened. Every instinct told her that this hint, however slight, was the breakthrough she had been yearning for. Without pausing to savor the moment, Linda quickly captured several high-resolution screenshots and noted down the precise location, complete with street coordinates and the zoom level of the map. Before the shock could subside, Linda's mind was already racing ahead. The thought of embarking on a journey to this unfamiliar, neighboring city ignited a spark of determination that overpowered all lingering hesitation. With her heart pounding and eyes still fixed on the small digital image that might hold her daughter's face, she felt a renewed surge of energy. The long nights of painstaking research, the bitter taste of near betrayal by fate, now converged on this singular moment of possibility. "It has to be her. I know it in my heart," she murmured, the words barely audible over the storm of emotions inside her. Linda began writing down every detail of what she was witnessing, a meticulous transcription of the location, visual cues, and any possible identifiers from the street scene. At the same time, she opened her email and sent a carefully crafted message to a trusted private investigator, outlining the new lead. The message was urgent yet measured, full of the painstaking details that only a mother who had exhausted every avenue of search could provide. In her mind, this was the turning point after 2 years of near-total despair, a window, however small, revealing that Anna could still be found. The computer screen, dimly lit in the dark of her study, glowed like a beacon of hope. Linda knew that this was only the first step in what would be a dramatic journey to uncover the truth. The digital map had given her a clue, but she understood that the real challenge now lay in verifying it in the tangible world. Every ounce of maternal determination surged through her as she began planning her next trip to the area where the mysterious pair had been captured on camera. In that quiet, hopeful moment, the pain of the past 2 years was momentarily overshadowed by the promise of reunion, and for the first time in a long while, Linda allowed herself to dream that perhaps, just perhaps, her daughter was alive and in need of rescue. Determined to transform her fragile hope into undeniable proof, Linda set out the very next day to verify what her heart and the scattered testimonies of this mysterious town had begun to suggest. The digital clue from Google Maps, which had kindled a spark after 2 long years, now needed grounding in the tangible, lived reality of the neighborhood. Every detail Linda had so painstakingly recorded demanded to be confirmed on the ground. That morning, with a mix of trepidation and fierce maternal resolve, Linda packed a small bag with essentials, her notebook filled with handwritten observations, a digital camera with fresh batteries, and a list of key questions she needed answered. She drove her aging car, now serving purely as a vehicle of hope, toward the coordinates she had noted from her Google Maps discovery. The route took her out of the familiar confines of her town into a neighboring city whose streets bore the quiet dignity of a place that had seen both better days and dark secrets. Upon arriving, Linda found herself in a modest, ivy-clad neighborhood centered around an old stone church. The church's spire pierced a pale blue sky, and rows of quaint houses and small businesses lined the streets in a patchwork of faded colors. This was a place where everyone seemed to know each other, and news, both good and bad, traveled swiftly, even if only in hushed tones. Linda parked her car a few blocks away and took a deep breath before heading on foot toward the church. With measured steps, she walked the familiar path to the entrance, noticing how the timeless architecture and the quiet hum of daily routines lent an almost surreal quality to the moment. Her heart pounded not just with anticipation, but with the weight of countless sleepless nights and relentless days that had led her here. This was more than a fact-finding mission. It was a pilgrimage driven by a mother's unwavering love. At the church's entrance, Linda discreetly approached a middle-aged woman who stood near the doors, carrying a stack of bulletin flyers. "Excuse me," Linda began softly, careful not to startle the woman. "I'm new in the area. Could you tell me if this church hosts any regular gatherings on Sundays?" The woman glanced at Linda with eyes that held both warmth and a hint of caution. "Yes, dear," she replied in a gentle voice. "We hold our services every Sunday without fail. Everybody in the community attends, and it's a very close-knit congregation." Linda's next question came hesitantly. I was wondering, have you ever noticed a young girl who attends? Perhaps someone who doesn't speak much or seems unusually quiet." The woman's face clouded for a split second before she lowered her voice. Leaning closer, she said quietly, "Now that you mention it, there is a girl who comes regularly. She never says much, and there's always a man with her. A man who seems to keep her very quiet, almost as if he wants her to stay unaware of what's happening around her." Linda's heart skipped a beat. "Are you sure? Do you recall any more details about her?" she pressed, her voice a blend of desperation and hope. The woman nodded slowly. "I can't remember every detail, but she appears to be around 13, possibly with dark hair that falls gently around her face. I've seen her only on Sundays, always by his side. Some of us have whispered that perhaps someone is controlling her, that she isn't entirely free. I'm not one to pry, but that's what I've heard." Linda scribbled furiously in her notebook as her pulse quickened. These details were in perfect alignment with the image she had captured on Google Maps. With a newfound sense of conviction, she thanked the woman and stepped away, her determination now bolstered by this intimate local insight. Not content with just the account at the church, Linda expanded her search. She ventured toward a nearby cafe where several regular patrons gathered each morning. The warm, inviting aroma of freshly brewed coffee and baked pastries filled the small establishment. As Linda approached the counter, where a young barista in a faded apron smiled politely. "Hi," Linda began. "I'm doing some research on the local community. Have you noticed a pair, maybe a young girl and a man, who appear here or near the church regularly, especially on Sundays?" The barista's smile faltered for a moment as he glanced past Linda's, as if searching his memory. "You mean the couple that comes in after the service?" he asked in a low voice. Leaning in conspiratorially, he answered, "Yeah, I've seen them. The girl seems so lost in her own world, almost like she's too scared to say anything, and he always seems a bit authoritarian, staying close by her side, not letting her interact with others. It's as if he wants to keep her out of the spotlight." Linda's eyes shone with a mixture of relief and sorrow as she absorbed the barista's account. Every description, every whispered detail confirmed what her heart had long suspected. Her daughter, Anna, might be living under the watch of a controlling figure in this quiet town. Armed with these corroborating accounts, Linda continued her investigation, that day by talking to a variety of residents. At a small convenience store, a weathered shopkeeper recalled overhearing conversations among customers, conversations about a mysterious pair who appeared every Sunday, whose presence was both familiar and strangely repressed. "I've seen that girl a few times, all alone with that man," the shopkeeper muttered before adding, "and I always thought there was something off about it." She never makes eye contact, and when people ask her, she doesn't really answer. Each conversation chipped away at the final barrier between suspicion and bitter hope, until, eventually, Linda compiled a consistent portrait of the mysterious pair. Descriptions of the girl's physical features, the soft slope of her shoulders, the dark flowing locks of her hair, and even the subtle set of her mouth, mirrored the images Linda had cherished and feared in equal measure. The man, dressed impeccably in a dark suit, was consistently described as retaining a strict, almost unnerving presence. The accounts painted a picture of a routine, an inescapable weekly ritual enacted with unnerving regularity, one that Linda could not ignore. That evening, Linda retreated to a small corner of a local library, where she had found an old, dust-covered computer. There, she painstakingly cross-referenced the details gleaned from her conversations with the timestamps and precise location data from her Google Maps screenshots. Every bit of the evidence seemed to converge on one horrifying possibility. The girl under the watchful eye of that man on that quiet street might be her Anna, a daughter long thought lost, and whose absence had tormented her every waking moment. Linda's eyes filled with tears as she reviewed the compiled evidence. The voices of those who lived in that town filled her with simultaneous hope and dread. This was no chance encounter on a digital map. It was a reality edged with a dark mystery. Had Anna been taken? Was she now trapped, silenced by manipulation and isolation? The answers lay in verifying these fragments, in further probing the lives of these strangers who, in their cautious whispers, had inadvertently given Linda her first solid lead. As twilight melted into night, Linda knew that tomorrow would mark the next phase of her daunting journey, a return trip to that small town, armed with the knowledge of what she now suspected. She resolved, with a trembling yet steadfast heart, that she would speak to more locals and, if possible, arrange to observe the pair directly during one of the Sunday gatherings. This next step was crucial, a test of reality, of the tangible truth behind the unsettling rumors that had surfaced in so many quiet conversations. Linda closed her notebook, her will as unyielding as ever. Every piece of testimony, every whispered detail had been etched into her memory. With the evidence in her hands and a mind burning with determination, she let herself hope for the first time in years. The quiet revelations of that day had rekindled a courage inside her, a hope that maybe, just maybe, amidst the everyday routine of a small town and the hushed voices of its people, lay the living remnant of her long-missing daughter. Linda had reached a point where sleepless nights, desperate phone calls, and countless hours spent poring over online scraps of evidence had coalesced into an unassailable dossier. Her heart, scarred by 2 years of uncertainty and sorrow, now burned with a resolute determination. It was time to take decisive legal action. Every fragile lead she'd gathered, the grainy footage, screenshots, handwritten witness testimonies, detailed maps annotated with the route and specific coordinates, and even the urgent emails to private investigators, was painstakingly compiled into a comprehensive case file. This dossier, printed in neat, organized folders and backed up on multiple drives, was her weapon against a system that had long dismissed her pleas as the desperate ramblings of a broken heart. For Linda, every piece of information represented a shard of hope that could finally piece together the painful puzzle of Anna's disappearance. Determined to challenge the prevailing indifference, Linda sought out a seasoned attorney renowned for defending cases involving missing children and alleged abductions. After many consultations and with her heart already bruised by years of disbelieving glances, she found an advocate, Mr. Jonathan Perry, a lawyer whose compassion matched his formidable legal acumen. In a modest law office lined with rows of thick legal volumes and framed certificates, Linda presented her meticulously assembled evidence. With trembling hands, she explained every detail, the eerie Google Maps image displaying a young girl walking silently beside a stern man near an ivy-clad church, the local accounts from the church attendant, the barista, and even the shopkeeper, all converging like disparate brushstrokes to paint a picture too vivid to ignore. Jonathan's experienced eyes scanned each document, his face growing progressively serious as he recognized the consistency and passion behind Linda's claims. Within days, Mr. Perry filed an urgent petition in the local family court, asserting that Anna had been forcibly removed and was being subjected to psychological control by a man whose identity, until then, had remained shrouded in local whispers. The motion was accompanied by a request for an immediate search warrant, as well as a temporary protective custody order to safeguard the welfare of the missing girl. Linda, tormented by the possibility that her daughter might be held against her will, attended every painstaking court session. In a tense courtroom heavy with expectation, the attorney detailed Linda's evidence before a presiding judge, outlining the pattern of behavioral change that was documented from local testimonies and the devastating impact of prolonged separation from her child. Every time Miss Perry spoke about names, dates, and locations, Linda's pulse pounded as she watched live the unfolding attempt to reclaim her daughter from the shadows. The courtroom drama was palpable, with a demeanor as controlled as it was icy in the stern environment of justice. The judge listened intently. Mr. Perry argued that the cumulative evidence, ranging from the suspicious images captured on Google Maps to the corroborative accounts of locals who described a young, quiet girl in his custody, warranted immediate intervention. He stressed that the subtle control exerted over the girl's actions and her fearful silence, observed over several weeks by trusted local residents, were red flags not to be ignored. This case, he declared, is not merely about one misplaced child. It is about a systemic failure, a scandal of deliberate concealment and psychological manipulation. His words resonated in the hushed courtroom, where even the legal clerk seemed transfixed by the raw pain and unwavering hope that emanated from Linda's testimony. At last, after hours of rigorous cross-examination and impassioned arguments from both sides, the judge ruled in favor of the petition. An emergency search warrant was approved, and the case was transferred to a specialized unit trained in handling sensitive kidnapping and abduction cases. Linda's decades of relentless pursuit were about to be vindicated by the legal system, a system that at that moment symbolized the potential to right the grave injustice suffered by a heartbroken mother and her lost daughter. The following day, under a heavy gray sky that mirrored the gravity of the situation, a team of police officers and forensic experts coordinated with child protection agents in a daring operation. Linda, accompanied by Miss Perry and a handful of supportive volunteers, arrived at the quiet residential area near the ivy-clad church, where the evidence had pointed. Her legs trembled as she pulled her car into the curb outside a nondescript building tucked away among modest homes. Every detail, the orderly lawns, the muted colors of the facades, even the quiet hum of suburbia, felt ominously still, as though the entire neighborhood was holding its breath in anticipation. Inside the building, police surveillance cameras tracked movement. Officers quietly moved through hallways, their whispers tightly regulated as they coordinated the final phases of their intervention. Linda's heart was a battleground of anguish and cautious optimism. Every memory of Anna, the sound of her laughter, the warmth of her small hand in hers, the bright sparkle in her eyes, echoed in her mind, fueling both dread and hope for a reunion long denied. When the opportune moment arrived, the officers breached the door with precision. A flurry of action ensued, marked by hushed commands, hurried footsteps, and the sound of shattering silence. After what felt like an eternity suspended between terror and hope, Linda was finally led into a small, modest room where a frightened girl sat in a corner, her eyes wide with confusion and pain. The resemblance was unmistakable. The girl had the same dark hair, the same familiar features that Linda had memorized over countless nights, and a lingering, haunted look that betrayed too many silent years. For a brief, heart-wrenching moment, time stood still as Linda knelt beside the girl, tears streaming down her weathered face, and whispered softly, "Anna, my darling, I'm here." The rescued daughter, overwhelmed by the sudden appearance of the woman she subconsciously knew was her mother, stayed silent at first, shocked into stillness by the multitude of emotions surging through her veins. Protective officers watched over the fragile reunion. As Linda cradled Anna in a gentle embrace, the pain of the past 2 years, of lonely nights, of relentless searching, of the unyielding fear that her daughter might be lost forever, was momentarily suspended in that tender, almost miraculous reunion. In the days that followed, investigators pieced together the events that had ensnared Anna in an environment of psychological control and abuse. The man, shrouded in secrecy for so long, was taken into custody pending further investigation, while Child Protection Services set in motion a comprehensive care plan for Anna's gradual recovery. Still, even as Linda began the long road toward healing for both her daughter and herself, there remained an undercurrent of raw empowerment. Linda's decisive action had not only forced the dormant wheels of justice back into motion, but had also shattered the silence that had threatened to destroy her spirit. In the quiet corridors of a judicial system reborn in that moment, a mother's unwavering will had triumphed, heralding a new chapter defined by hope, resilience, and an unbreakable bond between a parent and child. Linda's relentless pursuit, captured in every document and every tear, had culminated in a moment of action that proved sometimes the simplest truth. Love and determination can force even the most impenetrable barriers to crumble. And so, with a heart brimming with cautious joy, she clutched her daughter close, ready to face the ongoing challenge of mending what had been broken, knowing that every step forward was a victory forged in the crucible of unyielding maternal love. In the weeks following the dramatic rescue, a fragile but determined rhythm of healing began to take shape in Linda's life and in the life of her long-missing daughter. The sterile hospital corridors, where police and forensic experts had ushered Anna out under intense security, gradually gave way to the soft murmur of therapy sessions, the comforting hum of community support, and the slow mending of a bond that had been nearly shattered by years of darkness. Now, in a modest rehabilitation center filled with warm light and gentle encouragement, the journey of recovery had finally started. At first, Anna remained silent in the aftermath of her rescue, her wide, haunted eyes speaking volumes of the psychological captivity from which she had been freed. In the immediate days following the operation, Linda sat at Anna's bedside in a private room, holding her hand tightly as if to reinforce the unbreakable connection between them. There were moments when Anna would glance at her mother with a flash of recognition, a fleeting smile, a soft, quivering gasp. But then she would retreat into a disquieting silence. The pain of separation had etched deep scars, and the memories of a life manipulated and controlled left her dazed and unable to trust the familiar warmth that Linda so desperately offered. Understanding that her daughter's journey back to herself would be long and fraught with the echoes of lost time, Linda enlisted the help of compassionate psychologists and child trauma experts. Over daily counseling sessions, a team of dedicated therapists began working slowly with Anna, using gentle art therapy, guided reminiscence, and expressive play to coax fragments of her forgotten self from within the shadows. The sessions were punctuated by tentative breakthroughs, small moments when Anna's eyes brightened with the spark of recognition, or when her trembling voice attempted the simple utterance of Each of these moments was celebrated like a precious miracle, reaffirming Linda's lifelong resolve that her daughter was still out there, still capable of reclaiming her stolen past. Linda, too, was urged to participate in these sessions. At first, the reunion was overwhelming, a collision of joy, sorrow, and raw emotion that spilled over in tearful embraces and whispered confessions. The therapist welcomed both mother and daughter into a secure, nurturing environment where they could share their individual experiences without judgment. Linda spoke of the empty mornings and endless nights of searching, of every sleepless moment spent believing that Anna was still alive, despite the silence of the past 2 years. In return, Anna began to recall fragments of her early childhood. The sound of Linda's laughter during bedtime stories, the aroma of freshly baked cookies that once wafted through their home, and the gentle cadence of her mother's voice singing lullabies. Though these memories trickled in timidly at first, with each session they became threads that helped weave together the tattered fabric of her identity. Outside the counseling rooms, the community that had once whispered doubts about Linda's unyielding search rallied to offer both practical support and heartfelt validation. Local media, once indifferent to the fading story of a missing child, now celebrated the incredible journey of this mother's love, turning her story into a beacon for others who had lost hope. Support groups sprang up social media and in community centers, with volunteers organizing meal deliveries, legal aid and transportation for Linda's visits to Anna's rehabilitation center. These acts of kindness, while small individually, collectively bathed Linda and Anna in an atmosphere of solidarity, breaking down the isolation that had once engulfed them. For Linda, each new day was a testament to the truth that a mother's love can defy even the most relentless despair. While the scars of the years spent in anguish and uncertainty remained, she embraced each moment with a fierce determination to rebuild a life of hope and recovery. Slowly, she guided Anna, sometimes through gentle words, sometimes with the steady silence of shared tears, back to the memories they had once woven together in a tapestry of joy and love. The gradual return of Anna's voice, a tentative whisper during a therapy session, filled Linda with an indescribable mix of relief and renewed strength. It was an affirmation of all the lonely nights and relentless pursuits, a signal that the light of their bond had not been extinguished but merely dimmed, ready to blaze back to life. As the months passed, Anna began to reclaim fragments of herself. She started to speak more, first in hesitant whispers and later with increasing confidence, recounting bits of recollection that painted a picture of the kind, loving home she once knew. Linda, in parallel, learned to navigate the delicate balance of protecting her daughter's fragile psyche while encouraging her to step back into the world that had long grown cold in their absence. Together, they attended group therapy sessions, shared quiet walks in the park, and even revisited the neighborhood where Anna had once vanished, a pilgrimage of remembrance that allowed healing to bloom in the scars of the past. The transformation was both gradual and profound. Linda's unwavering determination, which had powered her through 2 long years of despair, had not only recovered a lost daughter, but had also redefined the meaning of hope and resilience in her community. Her story, filled with painstaking searches, endless nights and a refusal to succumb to despair, had become a symbol that rippled far beyond her individual tragedy. It was a lesson in the indomitable power of a mother's love, a reminder to the world that even in the darkest hours, when every path seems to lead to sorrow, the heart's determination can illuminate a way forward. In public commemorations and small, heartfelt interviews, Linda spoke simply yet powerfully. I never stopped believing. I never allowed the emptiness of those nights to steal my faith that Anna was still out there. Every minute I spent searching, every whisper of hope, it all led to this moment where I can hold my daughter again. Her words, delivered with both the weight of hardship and the brightness of redemption, resonated with countless others who had experienced similar losses. And so, in the quiet aftermath of a tumultuous journey, the story of Linda and Anna became etched in the hearts of many, a narrative that testified to the healing power of love, the necessity of unyielding hope, and the transformative strength that comes when one refuses to accept that despair is the final word. Their reunion was not just a personal victory, it was a stirring call to anyone who has ever felt abandoned by fate. It proved that even after 2,000 sleepless nights and 2 long years of searching, a mother's love can break through the darkest barriers, transforming sorrow into a new beginning. For 2,000 nights, my mother did not sleep, and one day she saw the answer on the screen. Subscribe so you don't miss the stories that prove that when your heart doesn't give up, even Google can be the key to a miracle. And share in the comments, would you have believed to the end like her?